And g'day again, flight simmers. Welcome to another one of my videos. Most of you would recognise the Sydney Harbour Bridge. So we're in Sydney today. We're moving south to the international airport, the Kingsford Smith International Airport, which is actually located in the suburb of Mascot. Today I'm just going to do a voiceover and not a running commentary. And I'll be using a checklist with a co-pilot female voice to help me through the flight. Those of you who have the Rotate MD-80 know that there's quite a lot of procedures to go through, and it doesn't hurt to have somebody to help you through it. I don't usually do it this way, but I thought I'd give it a try. We're actually heading up from Sydney to the Gold Coast of Queensland to Coolangatta Airport. Commonly known as Cooley, and of course we'll be flying in the MD-80. This is the Kingsford Smith Airport now. That's the international terminal, and we're swinging left looking at one of the cross runways 25 and out to runway 34 left, which is the longest runway in the southern hemisphere. As I said, the MD-80, we've got Qantas Link livery. And into the cockpit.
Cockpit preparation checklist. Parking brake. Set. Battery. On and locked. Position lights. On. The emergency exit lights. Arm. No smoking signs. On. Request GPU.
Opening up the doors there.
Requested. External powered bus left and right. Both on. Start pump. On. APU start. Started.
While
APU powered bus left and right.
While the APU is running up to 100%, we go to the tablet for loading the passengers' fuel. I'm using I used SimBrief for this. So first off is the fuel. Then our payload. And then our trip fuel. I'm loading it up now, expediting it.
Both on. Aft right fuel pump. On. External powered bus left and right. Both off. Dismiss GPU. Dismissed. HP bleed. Both on. Galley. On. Windshield anti-fog. On. Windshield anti-ice. On. IRS1 and mode. Both NAV. Yaw damper. On. Logo light. On. Radio rack. Fan. Cabin pressure. Set. Altimeter.
I've active Sky going for that. Lighting up the instruments and putting in the QNH.
Set. Fuel used reset. Reset. Hydraulic pumps 1 and 2. Both low. Takeoff condition. CG 0 and flap 0. Transponder 2000 and standby mode. Checklist complete. FMS assistant. Ref airport. Hey, init ref. Before start checklist. APU delete air.
Okay, now I don't need her to help me through the program in the FMC. Coolangatta Airports, Yankee Bravo Charlie Golf. And I'm using a company route from Simbrief. That was the flight number. Fuel reserves 2. Flight level 330. There's our cruise, wind and temperature. It's our local temperature. Transition height for Australia is 10,000 feet. Again, the outside temperature. Now I'm consulting the table provided by Rotate for the V-speeds based on the gross weight. V1's 132. VR. V2. Now I've already looked up Navigraph for the runway, the departure runway, which is 34 left, and we're going to use the Sydney 1 departure. Getting rid of the discos and moving the first waypoint up. Enter as the first waypoint. Now this is where I made a major mistake. I should have hit the execute key.
On HP lead. One off. PNUX feed valve left and right. Both open. Doors. All closed. Throttle. Idle. Galley. Off. Shaft and FWD fuel pumps. Left and right on. Center fuel pumps.
And there's nothing in the center fuel, so we don't need to turn those pumps on.
AS required. HP lead. Both off. Hydraulic pumps 1 and 2. Both low. Hydraulic pumps trans. On. Hydraulic box. On. Position and strobe lights. Both on. Anti-L light. On. Transponder. XVDR mode. Checklist complete. FCU. Flight director. On. Max bank angle. 15 degrees. Heading runway track.
I got that from Navigraph.
Set. Departure altitude.
I've set that for flight level 330. I'm not using ATC or VATSIM.
Set. Speed.
Now V1 should be 132 if I remember. But then I add another 10 to bring it up to 142 knots.
Set. Engine start checklist. Ignition switch YSSY.
Now it's time to get pushback.
Ground to cockpit, show you we got your plan there. Give me a call through the menu when you're ready to go. Ground to cockpit, tow's driving up right now.
Now while the truck's driving up, or the tow is driving up, I've got to set the trims. So we go to the gross weight, which is 10. Sorry, center of gravity, which is 10. Got to make sure it's dead level. Our flap setting for this flight's 11. And now we've got to bring down the long trim for the two sliders to match. And you've got to get them spot on, otherwise bitching Betty will
Alright,
complain.
all doors and hatches are closed. Ready to connect. Tow connected and bypass been inserted. Release the parking brake when you're ready. Alright, starting the pushback, and you may spool them. Clear to start engines.
On. Engine start right. On. Fuel valve right.
And we don't open the valve until the buses from the main engine generators come on. So we go down and watch to see N2 rising, and when it gets to 2021 we then open the valve.
Open. Engine start left.
Actually,
On. Fuel valve left.
I was wrong there. You have to wait for N2 to come up to 20, then the buses click in. So there goes the next engine for N2. Up to 2021.
Alright mate, operation complete. Go ahead and set the parking brake. Alright mate, disconnecting tow, stand by.
Open.
Right,
Checklist
open the
complete.
valve. We
After
wait for
start
the
checklist. Ignition switch.
we wait for the bus to kick in before we do that. Here it is.
The engine start. Both off. APU delete air. Off. APU powered bus left and right. Both off. APU off. Galley on. Fuel heat. AS required. Ice protect meter soul heat.
So is disconnected, bypass pin removed.
1 and
Thumbs
2.
up on the left and catch you next time. Have a safe flight.
Both high. PMUX feed valve left and right. Both closed. HP bleed. Both auto. Speed brake. Arm. Takeoff condition. CG and flaps set. Trim. Set. Flaps. Takeoff. Auto brake selector. Takeoff. Checklist complete. Taxi out checklist. Seat belts. On. Nose light. Dim. Timer. Run. Parking brake. Release. Brakes. Checked. Flight controls. Checked. Weather radar WX flashed cast. Set. Transponder. TAW/array mode. Transponder direction. Above. Auto brake mode. Arm. Oral config warning. None. Checklist complete. Takeoff checklist. Ignition switch both.
So I turned that off because we don't need that until we're just about ready to depart. And what you didn't see again was that I omitted to activate the execute button on the FMC. And you'll see that gives me a bit of a problem when I'm taking off. So now it's just a long taxi out to runway 34 left. Now we're just about ready to cross runway 34 left. So that's 34 left and 16 right. That's the international docking and cargo area on the right. I just turned on the nav control. That's the same as LNAV in your Boeings and I suppose the Airbus. We were crossing runway 25 then. Now, a bit of a problem with the scenery up ahead. Something went wrong with that. Where that big lump of concrete, whatever you want to call it, sticking out, there's actually an underpass. Unfortunately, we're just going to have to plough right through it. That was a freeway add-on. As yet, I don't think there's any payware for Sydney Airport yet. I think I mentioned before the livery is fictitious. Qantas Link have never flown the MD-80. Qantas purchased Trans-Australian Airway many years ago and they used to have DC-9s, but no MD-80s. And Qantas Link is only for domestic flights, no international travel. They usually have Dash 8s, Boeing 717s and some Fokkers.
On landing, lights left and right. Both on. Nose light. Bright. EPR mode.
Another mistake coming up, I
Take
forgot
off.
to hit the climb
Toggle.
button on the EPR.
On. Auto throttles.
Now on the MD-80 you can hit the toggle button before you rev the engine up. as you'll see, after the aircraft gets moving, starts to speed up, then you hit auto throttle. And because I didn't execute the FMC, that's where I have a bit of a problem. But I managed to sort it out. So engine speeding up.
On
Auto throttle
takeoff
on.
and informations. Positive climb, gear up.
We don't need that to listen to that. I had to gauge where V1 was because I hadn't executed the FMC. At positive rate, gear up.
Up, no lights. All above okay.
And this is where I find out that I hadn't hit the execute button. What the hell's going on, I'm thinking. That's autopilot coming on. Okay, let's sort this out. And I forgot to hit the climb button on the EPR. Why isn't this thing climbing? I know. I hit the nav button again. Okay. Flap, first flap up. That usually goes up at 180 knots. I'm waiting. So it won't speed up, so what do? I bug it up to 250 knots. But still nothing happens. So I go back and hit VNAV. Then I discover I hadn't hit the climb button. No, still nothing happening. Hit VNAV again. Go on. What am I going to do? I've still got the flaps down a bit. Hit VNAV. Ah, that's better. Now it's speeding up. Flaps all the way up now. What an idiot. now we can relax a bit. Looking at the annunciator, make sure everything's all right. Yeah, we're on track to waypoint enter. Climbing very quickly up to 10,000 transition height. Standard barrow 1013.
Yes. Checklist complete. Climb checklist. EPR mode. Centimeters. Auto brake selector. Off. Ignition switch. Off. Speed brake. Retracted. Hydraulic pumps off. Hydraulic hawks. Off. Nose light. Off. Landing lights left and right. Both off. Seat belt sign. Auto. Checklist complete. Cruise checklist. EPR mode.
We don't need that because we haven't reached cruise height. Now you'll now I'm going to fast forward to just before top of descent. Just checking everything's ready. Lining up the heading. Still a little while to go before I fast forward by the look of it. And there we are. We're at cruise height of 330, flight level 330. Now I'm into Avitab to have a look at the approaches at the Gold Coast, but this is where I run into trouble. I just couldn't open it up because it needed authentication, sorry. And I did manage to fix it later on after I finished the flight. So I had to rely on my Navigraph desktop charts. And the runway that we'll be approaching is runway 14 to the north. And this is where I was trying to sort out my Navigraph charts. I thought I could put them up on the screen, but I couldn't manage to do it. So at this point, all the approach information is already in the FMC. And with all that fiddling around with the Navigraph charts, I missed the top of descent. So the initial approach fix for runway 14 is 2,500. And you can see I'm already descending. The VREF, of course, is 40 degrees and 128 knots. Frequency for runway 14 is 111 10. Now, while we're descending, there's a bit of trivia here about Cooley Airport, which is one of the busiest airports in Australia. A lot of tourists flying in from overseas, and for years it's never had an ILS approach. Been a lot of complaints to CASA, that's the Civil Aviation Safety Authority in Australia. Particularly from international flights and even domestic, about the lack of an ILS approach.
Below, cabin pressure and landing elevation. Set. Engine sync. Off. Seat belt sign. On. Landing lights left and right.
Anyway, to continue on, the pressure came on big time. What was stopping the ILS being instigated into the airport was all the locals north of the airport knew that the I'll wait for the to go back to cockpit. Okay, as I was going to say, the initial approach to runway 14 is an RNAV approach, which meant that any traffic coming in would be over the coastal waters most of the time. But with an ILS approach, it meant that the flight path would come directly over a lot of domestic commercial area of the Gold Coast. And that was all the protesters used to object to. Anyway, eventually it looks like the ILS has finally been installed. There's one condition though, it's not supposed to be used unless of poor weather. Now today the weather's quite good. Technically I shouldn't be using the ILS approach, but I'm going to. Frame rates were starting to drop off there. Normally the frame rates are pretty good with the Rotate MD. Checking to see the QNH 1020. The decision height's 10,000 feet. One thing about the Rotate FMC, you'll see all the speeds are 240 virtually all the way down to the runway. So basically it means you've got to manage your speed. Quite frankly, what I do is when I get to around about 10,000 feet and below, I ignore the speeds in the FMC. Right now it's still up close to about 200 and looks like 270 knots. So time to slow it down a bit. I don't tend to use the speed brake all that much. You can see there the speed is gradually starting to come down to 240 knots. Once the auto throttle wants to take charge again, that's when I normally drop the speed brake. There you could see that the throttles came back a bit. This of course is a downwind left approach.
Both on. Checklist complete. Approach and landing checklist. Ignition switch both. On. Hydraulic pumps trans. On. Hydraulic box. On. Gear down.
And I'm just showing where the airport is. Now I haven't dropped the gear yet, although with this aircraft you can drop the gear and the flaps at fairly high speeds. And they're very good for braking the aircraft rather than the speed brakes. Decided to use them again. And again you can see the auto throttle is wanting to speed the aircraft up. So really I shouldn't be using them. So I decided to put them back. Now I'll rely on flaps, slats and flaps to slow down. Now I've disconnected the FMS. That will still allow the vertical altitude to keep dropping. I've dropped the speed back. And the speed brake again. Accidentally hit the trim thing. Turned off the autopilot, but just switch it back on, no problem. Again, the auto throttle doesn't like what I'm doing. Flaps down. That should be flap 11. Speed was still staying at 240, so I dropped it down even further. I think it's 185 knots. I'm just about ready to do a left base turn. And we're close to 2,500 feet for the initial approach fix.
Down, green lights.
Gear
Flaps.
down. I just armed the speed brake then.
Landing. Nose light. Bright. Speed brake. Arm.
I already
Auto
did that.
brake selector. Max. Auto brake mode.
Yeah, you can't arm the auto brake until all your flaps are all the way down. So now I should be able to arm the auto brake. That was the last one then. So that's flaps fully down, arm the auto brake.
Arm. Checklist complete. Taxi and checklist. Ignition switch.
We don't need that. Now you can see the ILS is taking us over the coastline and over the build-up area, which was what the locals were all complaining about. Turning to finals. Established on the ILS approach. Looks like the glowed slope's been captured. Dropping the speed down to VREF, which should be 133 knots. And we're set up for the landing. And And another mistake I picked up is I forgot to put in the decision height. Coming up to what's called Currumbin Hill. You can't do an auto land in the Rotate MD. My aircraft. No, we don't grow trees on the beaches on the Gold Coast. That's just a fault with the scenery.
300. 200. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
Said it was a hard landing. You'll see on the replay it's I don't think it was quite that bad. Right, time to tidy things up. Flaps all the way up. And now our co-pilot will do a taxi checklist. Spoilers are still up. Down they go.
Off. Ice protect meter soul heat. Off. Landing lights left and right. Both off. Nose light. Dim. Flight director. Off. Position lights. On. Speed brake. Retracted. Flaps. Retracted. Transponder. XVDR mode. Weather radar. Off. APU start. Started. APU powered bus left and right.
We don't turn those on until we dock the aircraft. Uh, the, it, I was going to say this airport is freeware available on the orgs. Yeah, on the org. And there's no auto gate
Both on.
available.
Nose light. Off. Checklist complete.
And there's no traffic marshal. And the Jetstar Airbus you see there, Qantas actually run Jetstar as their cheap airline.
Parking checklist. Parking brake.
There's some guy standing around there, he could have helped us in.
Set. HP bleed. Both off. Fuel valve. Both closed. Fuel pumps. Fall off except aft are on. Hydraulic pumps 1 and 2. Both low. Hydraulic pumps off. Hydraulic hawks. Off. Anti-foul light. Off. Seat belts. Off. Transponder. 2000 and standby mode. Request GPU.
Now we're not going to hook up the GPU. Now I decided to open the doors, but then I realised I wanted to do a replay, so I closed them again. Yeah, trees all over the beach. I didn't think that was all such a bad landing at all. That's Currumbin Hill in the background, which is a bit of an obstacle to runway 14 approach. I'm quite happy with that landing. The MD-80 has this tendency to be really nose high on landing, and sometimes very hard to get it down. And I think we'll have one more from the tower. And after this, we'll call it quits. I hope you didn't find it too messy with the doing the voiceover recording after the flight. It's the first time I've tried it. It just goes to show that there is a lot of procedure with the MD-80. Keeps you very busy. So that about wraps it up. Thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.